Hi, this is my review of In the Realm of the Elm King. This is an adventure for the Hackmaster role-playing game. As many of you know, Hackmaster is one of my favorite fantasy role-playing games, especially because of its complexity and simulationist way of playing. And this adventure features a very special bugbear. It's funny because recently I reviewed another bugbear themed adventure, the Slaughter at Splinterfang Gorge, and in both of these adventures they handle bugbears in very unusual ways. And even though there are some similarities between the two adventures, in the realm of the Elm King, there is a bugbear that is quite different from the one seen in Slaughter at Splinterfang Gorge. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. Well, the quality, I have two criticisms. The PDF has no bookmarks, so it's not easy to navigate the entire PDF. And my other criticism is the organization. It's not terrible, but there are some parts where different information concerning non-player characters could have been in a single paragraph or page, and instead of that it's spread out through the entire sections of the adventure, and that's not really useful or practical for a game master while running the adventure. You're going to have to flip through the different pages to see this little bit of information or clues that this non-player character is going to communicate to the party of adventurers. So that's a bit of a failure in organization. In my opinion, it's not that severe, but when it comes to the practicality of the document, well, it's there. But the rest of the quality, it's pretty good. Everything is well explained and written, despite the organizational issues. And you have these cool illustrations. Some of the maps are hand drawn, and you have maps of different sites and general areas. You don't have too many illustrations detailing the non-player characters, but you have just enough to express the theme and the mood of the adventure. Now let's talk about the contents. The story of the adventure features this nasty, evil old woman known as Elena Vomar, and people think that she is a witch, and she herself thinks that she is some sort of witch, but she is not. And she eventually goes into the woods and finds this abandoned baby bugbear. So she decides to adopt it against his will. He basically takes this baby bugbear and keeps it in a cage. And she starts treating that bugbear as her own baby, but she is also experimenting on the bugbear, feeding the creature different sorts of potions and such. And they have some pretty ugly effects on it, to the point that the bugbear becomes sterile. He cannot have bugbear babies. And the bugbear eventually, when he grows older, he escapes, and because he didn't have like a very happy childhood, to say the least, he starts to plan his revenge on humans. There is this village of Has nearby, and he gathers all the kobolds in the area, and he starts like carrying out raids. These attacks are a bit sporadic and not that severe, so people think that there isn't like a mastermind behind the attacks. And there is this rumor that the Elm King is organizing the forces. So Bomari, that is the bugbear son of Elena, is known as the Elm King in folklore and legend, but people think that it's just a myth, that there isn't really anybody organizing the kobolds, but he's actually there planning the attacks on the village of Has. And eventually he finds this female bugbear, but because he cannot give her bugbear babies, he starts kidnapping children and giving them to her as sacrifices. She kills them and eats them so that she can stay with him. However, he was not lucky, and she eventually left him, and so he is planning to steal more children. So the player characters have to arrive to this village of Has. This adventure serves as a very good connection between the free downloadable adventures from Cancer and Company's website um, and because those adventures form a bit like a mini campaign towards a friender skip. So if you're playing those free downloadable adventures and you want to eventually make it to friender skip, this adventure forms sort of like a bridge between the different sites. And so the village of Has has different. It's quite detailed, very complete in the description of places and non-player characters. So there will be a lot of opportunity for the party of adventurers to interact with the different villagers, and they will start to gather clues of the disappearances of the children, and eventually they could get hired to look into that. And something that I really like of this adventure is that there is a lot of freedom. And a lot of, what would you say, some false clues as to what is going on. So, for example, there is this bakery run by Goranu Remela, and she has some giant spider problems in her cellar. And she could ask the player characters for help, and they could go down there and deal with the spider problem. But they could also think that maybe those spiders are responsible for the missing children. And this encounter is actually somewhat silly because these spiders aren't really that much of a threat. Hackmaster is a very realistic game, and if you have a party of adventurers with decent armor, it's going to be a very easy encounter for them. But the real danger lies in this. This feels a bit like an honor trap or fame trap of sorts, because the characters are kind of like, oh, we defeated the giant spiders, we solved the mystery of the missing children, and then some days later children keep disappearing. The characters will take a severe blow to their honor and fame, because the villagers are going to think that they are scamming them. So the characters have to investigate, the adventurers have to look into every clue available. And I think that wilderness inclined characters could have a bit of an edge in this adventure, because, for example, if you have a ranger, you could do some tracking checks around, and you will notice that there are kobold tracks around the village and such. So the characters have different ways of finding out what exactly happened, but there are two main ways, perhaps the easiest ways to get to the bottom of things. The first one could be that finding out about the rumor of the Elm King, and that Elena Bomari could know something about the Elm King, and so they could travel to the wannabe hag's house or cabin in the woods. And if they manage to solve a puzzle, this is basically a puzzle box with some clues around it that is in the engravings and decorations in it. They could receive information from this Elena Bomarit as to where the Elm King is using, where he is hiding. There are also some more unsavory ways or unlawful ways to deal with Elena. So if they want a faster route, they could try that. But if they get caught doing what she asks of them, they will take a blow to their honor and fame. The other way to find out what is happening to the children would be to, as I was telling you, to perform some tracking checks around and follow those cobbled tracks. And this is a very wilderness heavy adventure when it comes to navigating your way through the story, because you have to move through different the forest and valleys, and you will get some wilderness encounters, some random things that could be positive. Perhaps you will find someone who offers you first aid help, because there are some other villagers moving around the village trying to find out what happens to the children. But you could also run into some ugly things, like, for example, giant centipedes or ticks, or you could find a kobold raiding party. You could also find some corpses giving you further clues. And as you go further up north, where the Elm King is hiding, the encounters will become more dangerous. There are a couple of encounters, one more dangerous than the other, that I think that could result in a very easy total party kill. So the player characters really have to know when to push their luck and not think about fighting and killing everything. So some things will be a bit beyond their level of power. If they eventually get to the hideout of the Elm King, which is known as Red Spur Gorge, you'll have one of the nastiest, you say, raids or forays into this maze of tunnels. I think this is an adventure that will strike the fear of kobolds into the player characters, because Red Spur Gorge is it feels a bit like a death trap. If it weren't for the fact that if you play smart and avoid different passageways, the kobolds are going to surround the player characters and they're going to get killed. I like it that this adventure site feels a lot like a real hideout. It doesn't feel like what would you say, Gygaxian dungeon where everything seems placed or designed just to challenge the player characters. This feels like a real hideout. Where you're going to see many details of the way that the kobolds are living their life and the way their what would you say, relationship with Bomari, the Elm King, and eventually you will have to fight against Bomari, and he's a very tough opponent. Although, if you notice that your party of adventurers, and that is your players, are dealing with things quite easily, I would recommend that you add perhaps 2 or 3 kobolds to the encounter to make things a bit more difficult. They even give you in the adventure some examples on how to make the encounter a bit more challenging. So this adventure is quite appropriate for both first level and second level parties of adventurers. There is also an optional encounter in this hideout in case the encounter results even easy, even when you apply all of those tweaks to make it harder. But if the characters report back to the village of what happened to the children, that sadly they are all dead, but if they manage to defeat the threat, they will be rewarded for it. And the village of Has offers an adventure hub so that player characters have a place to stay and go out and explore. But eventually you will want to go to Frander's Keep. So the village of Has, even though it's quite detailed, it still feels a bit like just a place to rest before heading out into more profitable avenues or sites. Now, let me tell you what I think of this adventure. I really like this adventure because it's quite simple, but quite lethal as well. A party of adventurers that think that this is just going to be like a walk in the park, they are going to get massacred in the kobold tunnels that I was telling you. And the wilderness encounters as well, they are quite risky. Some of them should be avoided in my opinion. And this is one of those adventures in which you could put a bit more emphasis on the Hackmaster elements of exploration and handling water and food, because if the characters are not careful, if they don't have enough rations, they could end up getting tired or perhaps even dying of thirst and hunger. It depends on how they are moving around and how much you want them to get lost. This is an adventure where the party of adventurers really have to prepare themselves, and there aren't many rivers and lakes, and so water is also a bit of a concern. In fact, in the Bomari's hideout, there is a way that you could get water. And so it's obvious that the author was also thinking that this adventure also has dangers when it comes to the survivability of the characters when dealing with the environment and natural need of eating and drinking. I think it would have been better if the random encounters were a bit more structured. You don't exactly know when to apply them. You have different random ways in which to generate them, but they don't give you much information about they just give you a few details of the terrain, but all of that you could use for example with your Hackmaster Game Master's Guide. You have here a lot of different tables concerning information of different effects of situational environmental combat modifiers, as you can see. So it would have been nice if they added more details on the different terrain and battlefields. But I think maybe it's because this adventure was written or geared towards Hackmaster Basic, which came it came before the Hackmaster Player's Handbook. But even so, this adventure, it's really fun. It presents enough challenge that player characters will not get overconfident. And as I was telling you, despite the organizational issues that I mentioned at the beginning, I think it's worth it for you to challenge your players with this trek into the wilderness and finding out exactly what is happening to these missing children. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.